Welcome to the English 403A weekly starter for the week of March 9th to March 13th. We're starting a new unit. Yay! I can't believe we're already going into Unit 4. So this week, you only have to do today the weekly starter and the weekly starter quiz. And then tomorrow you'll start Unit 4. Unit 4 is all about love sonnets. So we are going to be reading poetry and learning about sonnets. So you'll start with lesson 1 that goes over the overview of key elements of sonnets. Please make sure to read that carefully. We'll do Petrarchan sonnets on Wednesday, Shakespearean sonnets on Thursday, and sonnets from the Portuguese on Friday. All right, so the big ideas of this unit. Let me go through these so that you understand what your objectives are and what you need to learn. The first thing is to understand poetic structure. You want to understand the lines and punctuation. Try to start to understand rhyme scheme, meter, and poetic devices, such as figurative language, imagery, alliteration, and consonants. This makes poetry reading easier and more satisfying, understanding what the poet's trying to get at, why he's using certain elements. The other thing to understand is that the sonnet is an ancient and much used poetic form. It's one of the most basic forms of poetry, so understanding its special structure leads to a better grasp of the contents of the sonnet. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in just a minute. The last part that we want to talk about is the philosophical stance that's called humanism. It championed the creative and intellectual potential of human beings. In fact, Renaissance humanists believed that the ancient Greeks and ancient Romans demonstrated virtues and abilities that were worthy of study and emulation. All right, so let's talk about the sonnet in a little bit more detail. The sonnet has been written in every era since the English Renaissance. There are two main types. The English or Italian, and that's also called the Shakespearean, because Shakespeare was British or English, and Petrarchan. Petrarch was Italian. All sonnets are 14 lines. All sonnets are written in iambic pentameter. Just a little note, the easiest way to identify a Shakespearean or English sonnet is that it ends in a couplet, and that a couplet are two lines that rhyme with one another. Sorry about the excess baby noises today. Thanks for paying attention, even though there's excess baby noises in the background. All right, so let's talk about the Italian Petrarchan sonnet in a little bit more detail. So all sonnets, as I said, have 14 lines. So how are those lines broken up? The Italian Petrarchan sonnet's broken into what we call an octave. If you are familiar with Latin or music or anything, that octave means 8. And a sestet, meaning 6. So 8 lines and then 6 lines. An octave often is ABBA, ABBA. And then the sestet can choose one of the following: CDC, DCD, or CD, 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 CDC, CDE, etc., etc. Okay? So let's look at a little bit more detail about what's going on. So here we have the octave. It often is a quatrain and a quatrain, so 4 and 4. Sometimes it's 2 couplets. It could be an eternal quatrain, but we have ABBA, ABBA. So as you can see, it's within. It's insular. It's surrounded by the 2 A rhymes. What happens in the octave is that a statement, problem, or observation is presented. The subject is presented in the first quatrain and developed in the second. Then often we have what's called the volta, which is an important term to know for this unit. That is the turn or change, the shift in direction. It can be a shift in emotion, thought, or topic. Maybe it's going from general to specific. And then in the sestet, what comes is called the counterstatement, or resolution of the problem or conclusion. The subject is either altered or enlarged. I often understand more specifically what the topic is talking about. So that's the basics of the Italian sonnet. The other type of sonnet is the English Shakespearean sonnet. The English sonnet has the simplest and most flexible pattern of all sonnets. That is 3 quatrains of alternating rhyme and then a couplet. So you can say A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, G, G. Okay, so that is Much more simple, as you can see, to remember. So let's look at what the English sonnet does. So we have quatrain, 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 volta, and then couplet. Whoops, excuse me, I went ahead too fast here. And then couplet. So the English sonnet, and authors specifically figure out which sonnet type they want to use based upon where they're going to place things. So as you'll notice, in the English sonnet, the volta occurs at the couplet. The last two lines are where our shift occur. So in the first part of the English sonnet, the topic subject is introduced in the first quatrain. It's developed in the succeeding two quatrains. And then you have the voltas now between the third and quatrain and the concluding couplet. Quite often it's also present between the second and third quatrains. We have like a shadow volta or a start of the volta there. All right, the next thing that we need to understand about the sonnet is that it's written in iambic pentameter. I'm not going to go into iambic pentameter in too much detail. Basically what it means is pent meaning 5. There are 5 iambs per line. An iamb is an unstressed stressed. It's called a foot, so unstressed stressed. So as you can see an example here, to be or not to be, that is the question. All right, and in this case we end on an unstressed, which does not create a full foot. The English language, we often speak in iambic pentameter naturally, but poets specifically write in this meter. So key element to know. All right, that is the starter for today at this point. Hope you were paying attention. There will be a quiz on the material. You can go back and review. Thank you so much for watching this study. Have a great day.